Hello, YouTubers. This is another session where we continue our discussions into developing OData Neo. In the last session, we had a little bit of discussions about, being able to mock internal functions and being able to verify or test drive, how, a particular self-sufficient or dead-end function, kind of handles certain exceptions. Like, for instance, if you have a certain class or a certain service that may run into an out of memory exception, right? How do you test drive that if you can't mock a dependency? If the service itself doesn't have any dependencies, and you can actually attach an exception being thrown to one of these dependencies, one of these services. So I'm just gonna try to pull out the Visual Studio here real quick. Here's OData Neo, and here is Sam. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning.
All right, let's get started. Are you good?
Good.
Good. Okay,
You
awesome.
remember you see the me.
You didn't see the meme? What
You
happened?
see the me. You see the me.
Oh yeah, I CC'd you. Yeah, because I want you to see the notification, right? That's how. Uh,
Yes.
FYI. So okay, let me see if I can um pull out the branch, uh, maximize screen for the kind of the resolution, and then we'll get started real quick, my friend. Okay, so I think I missed I missed a session on you, right? And didn't attend the Monday session, but we can actually do it together today. Okay, so here's the deal, Sam. Let's go back to this thing. So where were we last time? We were basically saying that um, Prabal, that you have the we have a service here in place. And this service basically, let me run all the tests here just to see where we are. Here's a service. Let's do this real quick. Okay, so I have a failing test in here. And this failing test says what? This failing test is saying, I want to verify that when a generic exception, no matter what this exception is, happens within that service, that tokenization service, I want to see my service properly handling it and reacting to it, right? This service can be something like out of memory exception or, internal issue exception, something that you can't easily mock in a service that doesn't have a particular dependency, right? And we had a little bit of discussion about that and went back and forth and said, okay, we need to really figure out a way, to verify that we can actually handle a service exception. So last weekend, I wrote a library called InternalMock. And what does InternalMock do is that it helps you kind of find any private method or a private, routine within your service, and it will help you mock it and throw an exception out of it. So this way, this is revolutionary. This is evolutionary because you're basically getting, hybrid mock in your internal self-sufficient service. So how would that look like, right? So we're gonna need to kind of rewrite our test a little bit because now our test, I'm trying to verify that a service exception will be thrown, not this one. We need a different one sec. I'm trying to verify that a service exception should be thrown, and I don't have that. First of all, we need to fix the file names. In here it says validations. This should say exceptions, and the other one should say validations because I think we copied the file. So this is validations, and this here is exceptions. Right there. There is exceptions. Okay, how are we gonna do that? The engineering experience here is really, really important. I want to make sure that when we're throwing an exception and verifying an exception, it doesn't feel too different from what we're used to. Like in here, we basically said, oh, just throw a bad thing and just make it happen. In mock, you basically go and say this dot my mocked dependency dot setup like this, and then you go and say dependency, and then you go and say, oh, this guy is gonna like this, dependency dot get something, right? And then you're going to have to go here and basically go and say throws, right? And you add the exception in here. But this is not the case here because we're building a library. So you won't always have dependencies. You're going to end up with things that are not exposed to that kind of capability on that level of exception. So here's what we can do. Here's a library I developed that's going to help us a lot. It relies a lot on Harmony. For people watching us, are if you want to sponsor someone in GitHub, the guy who developed Harmony actually ended up being a guy from Ukraine, and their country is being destroyed every day. So go ahead and sponsor these people. Send them some money, support them. They are in a terrible situation. So okay, so here's InternalMock. I'm gonna go pick it up. That's InternalMock, and then we're gonna install this real quick. This is a beta release, so kind of, flatten its edges a little bit later. And then we can go here and say, okay, so this is your exception. I'm gonna go here and say, okay, my service, this is the service that I have, the tokenization service. I can now mock on that service itself and mock parts of that service. So I can go here and say, for this particular method name, I want to go, what's the method name that I want to attach an exception to it internally? It's this validate O token query. This one here doesn't have any dependencies, but thanks to this library, we can now go and say this is going to throw an exception, just like that. So now I mocked an internal dependency to test part of my method, which is the try catch piece. And now I can go back here and say, after you've done the validation and all that kind of stuff, pick up that service and then clear all the other calls. This patching that we're doing, just detach. Very similar language to your mock, very similar language to the way you're doing things. The only difference here is that I want to go here and say this is my O token service exception. So this is your O token service exception. Let's make the T lowercase. It's a little bit better this way. And let's do an equal. This is assert throws exception like this. And then I want to go here and say my O token service exception should also dot inner exception should like this. Or we could just do that. We can go here and say, assert true your O token service exception, right? So this is exception here, right? This guy will be the inner exception is a failed O token service exception. So that basically we're verifying that we localized the exception and we also generalized and categorized the exception. It's going to help us a lot down the road when we're building on top of this piece. Now you can actually categorize.
Line 31 has a similar name.
Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't error out. Is it
Line
because of?
31.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised it didn't error out. This is why I touched this guy. I don't know why it didn't do that, but I guess we don't need that guy, actually. And we also don't need that guy. So our service is going to be much, much simpler this way. And now I can take this guy out like this. And I can go up in here and take this guy out like this. And I can just go do that. So how simple this is. This is a very simple way, you can verify things. Now, ideally, I want this test to fail. I want this test, when I run this test, it should freak out. It should go and say, you know, I want my values in here. So here it is. It's basically saying I expected you to throw a service exception, but I received a regular exception. So that means that this library actually did the magic that we wanted, right? So Sam, now you're gonna have to make this pass. Do you want to make this pass? Do you think you can make this pass? Here, fail. Go for it. Have fun. Do you want to write code today or do you want to write code today? Hmm?
It's okay. So
Hmm.
you mock uh, internal method to
Mm-hmm.
return an exception.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how about if we have overload for the method?
Overload. Okay. What would that look like?
Since we have two methods with the same name but with different parameters.
That means you're adding additional APIs and changing your implementation just to get to a point where you can test it. So this way, you're not really driven by the value or the domain that you're trying to fulfill. Now you're just trying to work around to kind of make something like that work. I don't know if that's a better approach.
Mm.
Hmm.
Anyway, I mean, you're using the string master name string as a first parameter.
Hmm.
Um, so you cannot stop customer to collect the overload for the same function name.
Hmm.
Anyway, so use the exception. Um, so validate
Hmm.
all the token.
Do you want to share your screen, Sam?
Yeah, let me try my best. Share screen. Okay. Window. What the new sharing?
All right, let's go. With your bright screen, zoom in a little bit. Too old to see that text.
Yeah, let me build.
All right.
Right. Make sure can use your batch you get package.
Yeah,
Let's restore the project.
yeah.
It cannot find this one.
Could not be found. Are you missing a direct? Oh, it's gonna come back. Just rebuild. Yep, it's pulling your NuGet package, right?
Yeah, I try to rebuild the solution.
It wasn't able to pull it. Did I miss a commit for
Yeah,
the reference?
you forgot to add the commit for the project setting, I think.
Let me go back and fix that. Actually, just add it from your side. Just go to NuGet.
Yeah, never
Just
mind.
yep.
Uh, Let me know the name.
Yeah, just internal mock. Just
Internal
internal
mock.
mock. Yeah, so it
Now we have
finds.
the internal mock.
Yep, now we have
No
internal
heading.
mock. Yep, see how projects they give birth to other projects and other products.
But we internal mock we haven't added the internal mock into the project, but it
Yeah,
built.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I just added it like right now. That's so weird. Why didn't add it to the system? That's very weird. Huh. Now it says succeeded. Say-
Yeah, it's weird.
So now if you run that test, what happens? Should pass, I think.
It's running.
Sorry, it should fail. Yeah, there. Should throw service exception,
Okay,
right?
right?
Yeah, double click on that guy, see what it sent over to you. Yeah, it's right there.
You add into the test. Yeah, sorry for that. I check the source product.
Yeah, but still Visual Studio is giving you an error about it though. What's that all about? Were you building just the core or are you building the
Build
entire
a
system?
solution. Now it's okay. So yes,
Okay, perfect. Let's go and fix that test.
we
Yeah.
have two test cases failing.
Let's pick up the service test first. Maybe it's the patching. Maybe it's something in the library that we can fix. Not this one,
Not
the
this
second one.
one.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Mm,
So it's
mm,
basically saying, you know, when a generic exception occurs,
mm.
we want to localize that exception into a failed token service exception, O token service exception, and then categorize it into an O token service exception. That's really all that it's trying to do. So it'll be just another catch block, Sam, on your side.
So in the it's an exception, right?
Yeah. Yep, there
So
you go. Yep.
catch
Mm-hmm.
um,
Exception.
exception
Mm-hmm.
ex slow new token service exception put
That's right.
it as
Well, you want to localize that. So this is the category of the exception, right? You want to take
mm,
that exception and localize it into a failed O-token service exception. There's two exceptions here. One that talks about the specific issue and one
mm,
that categorizes it, right? So you see how it's looking for failed O-token service exception is supposed to be the inner exception of your O-token service exception. This is why it's barking at you because it's saying, wait a second, you're supposed to pass, a kind of a different model from a different type than
mm,
this one. Mhm. Go ahead. So I would just define if you do var failed O-token service exception, failed
field
O-token service exception.
or token service exception.
And then just
What's the type?
initialize. Yep. Hmm.
What's the type for this one? Is a O
Oh,
token
no, it's just failed. Just type failed O token service exception. The exact same name.
field. We have this one. Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, you're still asleep. That's what it is. We'll wake you up, get you some coffee. All
I
right, there
didn't
you
have
go.
the coffee machine.
You don't have the coffee machine? Okay. All right.
So
So
check the exception core. So it should work
yeah, it
now.
should work. That's it. That's all you gotta do. Now run the tests. Now run all the tests and let's see.
No, in
Here
this
we
case, we should just return through the field or token service exception. Do we need the audit service exception to wrap it
yeah,
again?
Yeah, I'll tell you why we need that. Because sometimes
Okay.
you have like, 5 or 6 different issues that all belong to a service exception, and you don't want your upstream services to deal with all of these. You want them to go and treat them at a categorical level. Let me take so you made it pass. Submit that passing test, and I'll explain that real quick, and then we'll talk about the next step. So see, this works. Can you run all the tests, please, Sam, just to make sure everything is running?
No.
Here we go. No, you don't
Yeah.
want to do it? Okay.
They are one of the test case failing.
Just one failing or all of them?
Only
Yeah,
one, I think.
they're all green.
Or green?
Yeah.
No.
No?
Or green.
Yeah, you need some coffee, I told you.
So in
So
this
so there
case, I
mhm.
make both pass.
Yeah, this one is pass.
Pass.
Yeah, just this one. You don't need the other one. I think the other one is just a patching issue in the
Okay.
library that I could fix right away.
Like this one.
Yeah, that's the one.
Commit and
That's it.
push.
Commit and push. Okay, so let's talk about this part for a second because I want us to be on the same page for this one because it's really important. Where's my draw IO? Let's go here. What is this? So I should probably create a shared, no, not shared. I should probably create a design document for the, you know, the all the documents and the designs that we're sharing. But just to be really brief and just explain this, what happens, Sam, is that sometimes you'll have something like this. Let's go here and say, you have an invalid student exception like this, and you will have not found student exception, and you will have something like duplicate student record exception. So each one of these exceptions, they handle specific case and they come from a different source, right? So not found, you're going and looking up in the database, oh, I couldn't find this record. You're looking for a record that's supposed to exist in a particular category, but I couldn't find it. Or the data that you're passing in is not in a good format. Or, there's a duplication in terms of registration for this student. All of this is what I call localized exceptions. These are exceptions that speak about a particular issue, in your validation or processing service. And then you can encapsulate all of that under a category that's something like student validation exception. And this validation exception basically allows your upstream services to either treat all of these exceptions in one shot as one big monolith and treat them all the same, or it can go and say, no, I want to treat this guy specifically differently by returning 404. You'll see this a lot in API controllers when we go and say, well, if you get a duplicate student, then you get a conflict 409. If you get a not found student, you get 404. But everything else that might come out of this, invalid student reference exception, whatever the case may be, I want to just return bad request, 400. So it makes it a lot easier for your consumers to decide whether they want to deal with your exception at a local level, specific issue level, or at a categorical level. The same thing applies, of course, to dependency exceptions, dependency validation exceptions, and service exceptions. Does that make sense? No? Not coming through? Mm. What do you think?
Is that correct behavior? Because you're basically saying if anything goes wrong that I kind of don't expect, wrap it up and then say, hey, you screwed up, caller.
So exceptions are things that we expect. That's why we program for it. They're not an unexpected exceptions. They're expected exceptions. And they are our way of controlling the flow properly through going and saying, other than my happy path, I will call it an exception and I will handle it and communicate it properly. So for instance, if you're trying to add a student that already exists in the database, I want to go back and return a 409 conflict, right? I want to
So,
be
sorry,
able.
Hassan, that's kind of not what I was saying. Like
Mm,
in the tests that we've just written there,
mhm,
you've got like a null O token exception, which is,
mhm,
you gave me some invalid input. And
mhm.
then the second case was something happened, right?
Yep,
And an exception happened. Okay, so
yep.
that might not necessarily be down to bad input. So
Yeah,
why
it
would
could be
we in that
memory leakage.
situation?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Right. So why in that situation would we say, hey, caller, you screwed up rather than we screwed up? If that makes
Well,
sense.
service exception means we screwed up. Validation exceptions means you screwed up.
Right.
Dependency validation means you screwed up, but we didn't call you on that. Someone else or something else that is we are relying on to validate did determine that. And then you have dependencies. So there are four kinds of exceptions. I'm actually there are three, but with a subcategory. There are three things that can come out of a service. Either a validation exception, that's us telling the caller you screwed up, or a dependency exception, that's us telling the end user, hey, you're fine and we're fine, someone else we're calling is struggling, right? Both of them gets communicated by 500 error because you were going and saying it's none of your business whether this is failing because of something we rely on or not. We took note, we will communicate, we'll take ownership and tell you that this is what's happening, but our engineers will get the logging that it's a dependency. And then you have a service exception. Both of these are on our side, and this is on our side. There's a hybrid model that lives in between those, is what I call the valid dependency validation exception. And this dependency validation exception is still the user fault. We're basically going and saying your input is invalid, but we're not the ones that's saying that. Something downstream, have determined that this dependency is not in a good format and you need to deal with it. This is why you will find some localized exceptions. Like this is your student validation exception. You're going to end up with something in here that is like a service exception, and this service exception in here, let's go here and say student service exception. And this can be all kinds of craziness that might come out of a service. Like I said, your dependencies, even when you don't have, logical dependencies, you still have infrastructural dependencies and you still have framework and OS dependencies, right? So in here, you could get something like, out of memory exception, right? Or something like, I don't know, whatever it can be, an exception, internal error exception like this, or whatever the case may be that can come out of that. Something to the service exception, whatever that may be, right? The categories help us tell the user whether they need to take an action from their side or we need to take an action from our side. This is why the language of the exceptions in our code base here is basically saying this very clearly. If you go and look at the exceptions, the OToken validation exception says fix the errors and try again. But the service exception says what? The service exception says contact support. This is not your fault. We screwed up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just making sure that we weren't like doing a general catch-all and then saying, "Hey, it's your fault." It's like, well, is it?
Yeah, that will certainly not be, something I type. But let me show you what this looks like also in the real world. Like in the real world, when you have a controller like this, let's go to OSSC real quick. And let's go to controllers and let's go to something like attendance controller. You can see here very clearly, we're basically going and saying, if it already exists exception, communicate conflict. If it's a generic validation exception, without having to dig into a specific case, then say bad request. If it's a dependency or a service, then say, oh, this is our fault. This is an internal server error. We are the ones responsible for it. There's a little bit of magic underneath this. Like this bad request is coming from another library that I wrote. It's called RESTful Sense. And what it basically does, it takes your data property in the exception and turn it into problem detail. And this problem details how to properly communicate, issues on the parameter level or the property level in every model. Okay, so there's a little bit nuance to this. There's more to it than just kind of communicating that information. How is this going to help us down the road?
I think you were saying in the last session, weren't you, about the was it the IETF? They've got
Yeah.
specification for how we should be communicating.
Yep.
It kind of confuses me a little bit that the framework doesn't kind of give you some of this stuff out of the box, and that we have, or you feel you have to extend it in order to get kind of, if this thing is like a standard, then why does MVC not really kind of like implement the standard, if that makes sense? For lack of a better term.
There's a reason for it. If you're building an SDK, you have one of two options based on what you can do. You can either, do a little bit and let the community kind of build their own, or you can do all of it and say, I'm the only authority and resource. Nobody's holding our hands and saying, don't go ahead and, add this to the open source repository of ASP.NET Core. It's there. It's just not conclusive the way it is in RESTful Sense.
Well, there is the middle ground, isn't there? Which is the current way ASP.NET Core works, which is you can take the absolute bare bones, or you can take some of the various extensions that are extra libraries, but they're optional. I can take ASP.NET Core without taking ASP.NET Identity, for example.
Yep.
If I want to do my identity differently, I don't have to have the whole solution.
Yep.
But yeah, it is interesting that core framework libraries don't include sort of IETF standards or.
It does for bad requests and a couple of others, but not all. And it took a lot of work to do this. Like RESTful Sense evolved a lot over 2 years. Like, having to do that kind of work, is massive undertaking. But we made it. We made it work. If you're building a framework, you want to also allow, some kind of extensibility. I would assume I will give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'll just go and say, okay, there are published, ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET, is very, very old. It predates a lot of the RESTful standardization that we have today. So what were the circumstances? I don't know, but we took care of all of it. All of it. From the beginning till the end, and we handled all of them. All of them. And if you go on the controller side, you will find that this is the RESTful controller, which is not really a controller, it's just that really actually a client. And every single URL, to every single exception, to every single error that you can imagine in the universe is there. This is why RESTful Sense is super powerful. It has over 60,000 downloads at this point in time for a very specific niche topic like this. I'd say it, and that's with the little advertisement that I'm doing for it. I'm just trying to get my job done properly. So I go build these libraries, just like we did with InternalMock.
It's incredible that we've come so far in like web technologies, that something as daft as just returning an error now needs such a complex standard to it.
Yeah, well, you need to reference the right URLs. You need to, yeah, you want to do things properly. You want to standardize, right? You want to. I've seen more. I can tell you right now, 90% of the code out there when it comes to controllers, people just say try catch exception and throw 500 all the time. And then someone comes and adds insult to injury and says, oh, let's return 200, but tell the user that something is wrong. That's even worse than the guy that, threw an exception, right? It's all kind of, wishy-washy, let's just stitch some BS together and just call it a day and call it a job.
You don't
So
want to know what I do with exceptions.
I'll, just, don't out yourself, So,
I decided that it wasn't a controller's concern, and if anything happened in the call stack, I catched it in a piece of middleware and then handled it there. So I have one exception handler for effectively
okay,
my entire request pipeline.
okay.
I
And what
don't know
if
if
you
that's right
decide to
or wrong
expose a
or
different
what.
protocol?
Well, I'm working on the basis that it's a REST API. We use OData for the entire API layer at the moment, and it's all HTTP calls. We do have some Signal R stuff in there, but that responds with its own response pipeline effectively. So at the moment, I don't have that problem of different protocols. If I did, I would probably build some other API alongside that would handle different ways of communicating with it. Because, I mean, how could you have like an OData controller that returned, I don't know, gRPC responses or something?
Yeah, you can. The whole point of OData Neo is to allow that kind of agnosticism in the protocol. But anyway, I wouldn't go that route. I try to keep things simple and out there in the open. I think if we go with a middle layer, that basically means we're creating this one blob that handles all the APIs and all the controllers and the exceptions that come out of that, which eventually is going to end up with you having about, 50 blocks try catch, which basically means that if I want to add one extra exception to be handled, or if I want a controller method to react differently to the same type of exception, I don't have that luxury. I'm gonna have to go and hack together something, to make it work. So if, for instance, if you want to react to not found entity exception at the student layer as an error that is circuit breaking versus not found library card, which is not circuit breaking, and you want to return 206. Are you guys familiar with 206 code for HTTP verbs? 206 basically means partial success. So it's not 0 or 1. The world is not like that, right? Nobody's absolute bad and nobody's absolute good. So 206 is basically a way to go and say, hey, non-critical path has failed, but the critical path for us have succeeded. Here's 206 with some more details, right? If I want to handle that differently in different controllers, middleware is not going to be your friend there. So that's why I try to keep things very abstract and very redundant, seemingly redundant, so people can actually, anybody can pick them down the street, be like, yeah, I see my brokers, I see my servers, I see my controllers. This is how I'm going to communicate that information. So anyway, just before we wrap this up, the next step for us is the O node stuff, right? This is done. We can actually merge that PR today. Sam, do you want to do the honors and merge that PR today for the O token service? Go for it.
You want to merge the pull request to the okay?
Yeah, this is our very first PR to merge in. Here's your business logic. I mean, hopefully someone will do a code drop and clean up whatever Joe wrote in there, in terms of business logic, but we can sorry Joe, it's just the whole ref thing is getting on my nerve, but I'm gonna let kind of I'll take a stab at it. We need to simplify our business logic a little bit. There he is. Speaking of the devil, Joe, we're
How many
merging the
nested if statements do we have in there at the moment,
he,
Joe?
he I don't know what he did there. Should we keep it hanging until Joe cleans up the logic a little before we merge the PR, or do we wait for Joe? Joe, you need to get rid of these refs and stuff the stuff that you did there, huh? Joe.
I'm not understanding what you're saying right now. What? It's just like a lot of yelling.
So we're about to merge the PR,
Yep.
and I think the business logic that you wrote there for the parsing needs to be simplified before we merge it. Do you want to take a stab at it before we merge the PR?
Not really.
Why are you looking like Jack Dorsey this morning? You just need a beard and that's it. That's Jack Dorsey.
Yeah, it's coming back. It's just a little slower than I expect.
Okay, I'll try to simplify that logic a little bit, before we merge up. Just open up the PR, Sam, and I'm just gonna throw a comment in there just to block it and say, hey, we need to simplify this logic. Here's GitHub. This will be our very first service. Yay. We're making progress there. So this is OData Neo. Here it is. Where is the PR? Sam, do you have it? You want me to
I
open it?
haven't got a pull request. Let me create a pull request.
Okay. So Joe, you missed all the fun, the internal mock and stuff like that.
I had a call that went a lot later than I anticipated.
That's always how it goes. This is why I leave like at least 20 minutes. Do you start your meetings 5 minutes in? I usually try to do that. Like I don't start 10 a.m. I set my meetings to start at 10:05.
Oh,
So
then you
people,
have 5 minutes to chat and let people meander in.
yeah, use the restroom, go get coffee, whatever you want. Usually they don't start until 5 minutes in, so may as well. Right.
Next time, can you give us a notification one day before
Give us a notification to what, Sam?
when we'll start the section?
Oh,
Oh.
Tokenization service. So you mean the next session? Well, I'm CCing you every time, so you know.
No, today is the first time, not every
Today is
time.
the, today is the first time? Okay. So I'm gonna just leave one tiny comment in here. And the comment will basically say, wow, we did put a lot of stuff in there. I'll just go here and say for our business lodge in here, we need to simplify this. We need to simplify this a little bit. That's all. And then, we can start our discussion about ONode. We're gonna kind of move a little bit faster with ONode. We're gonna start the discussion around, what are we gonna do with this array of tokens? How are we gonna build that tree, right? And think innovation. Sam, I know you have solutions for this. I
No.
want you to try. Yes, you do. Stop it. I want you to try to think different. Think outside of the box. We want to see if there's a way we can collaboratively, as a community, come up with a solution that can produce O nodes that can actually be processed. Because once that guy is done, the rest is easy. If we get a good list of O nodes that are structured properly, we can go from there and say, okay, map that into raw SQL expressions, into strings. It doesn't matter. Like this O node piece is the piece. And if we get that one right, that's it. Sam, that's it. That's the guy, right? And hopefully, we can get this wrapped up before .NET Conf, because I want to go out there and tell the people about the great work that we've been doing, and just get ready, because a lot of people, I just made the announcement about a new position that I've taken, and people are already sending me messages saying, well, you're going to stop with OData? I'm like, no, I'm not stopping OData. What are you talking about? OData's not my job. I want people to understand that. The boss here is Sam. Sam is the OData guy. We're just kind of playing around with code and building great things and things that we will be using ourselves. So,
I
do we have a deal?
try my best to change my title. I'm not only audit guy.
Ah, stop it. By the way, I'm nearby your building now, so you're gonna have to stop by next week and we'll eat food together, okay?
I have a
Anyway,
question. Was there a thief in your house?
is there seafood in my house?
Thief? I mean, where's your TV behind you?
I was going to ask the same thing. You're behind you. You're missing the big
Where's the monitor
Oh,
behind
oh,
you?
oh, this guy. So I took my 49-inch monitor over to my workplace because
Oh.
they're not gonna give you a 49-inch monitor over there. You know, you get your 4K monitor and deal with it. I don't want a 4K monitor. I want a 49-inch monitor, and I'm getting the Odyssey 4K to put it in here and move this one back there. So I didn't get robbed. Long story short, I didn't get robbed. You know, I'm still here. You know. Anyway, Friday, we're going to talk about ONode. You know, take it simple, take it easy, and let's just get that one done. If we finish the ONode piece, we can now go and say, pass in any query, get that query out from the other side into something that's processable. ONode is the hard part, right? And we may, we may or may not break ONode service into tiny components, like tiny services. Go
Do
ahead,
we
Paul.
need
Go ahead.
O-nodes?
Huh?
Well, we've already got, with O tokens, we've already got domain models effectively as a straight array. Do we need to structure them in a tree?
That's a great,
Just putting it out there.
that's a great way to start our Friday discussion. So we'll see if that works, you know, and then see if that solution works. Ideally, we know what needs to come in and what needs to go out, right? Whatever that middleware is, we can basically work around how we're going to implement that, just like how we did the tokenization service, right?
What would you expect the result be of processing an O-node?
Something that's easily convertible into strings or expressions or any other model. Not just for us, but for the people who want to come in and say, I don't want expressions or OData token. I want to produce SQL, just raw SQL out of this. I want it to be simple. I want a grandma in Nebraska to be able to use OData Neo. So one way or another, it needs to happen. So
So
this is
from O-nodes, we go to everything else?
yeah. So token, ONode, everything else. Of course, we're gonna have like just like how when you play a video game, sometimes you get outside of the box from the team that developed the platform a free game, but we want to allow people to actually use that platform to develop their own things, right? That goes back, Sam, if you remember, that goes back to the discussion we had with one of the clients. He said we want to do other things with this info. We're going to turn it into Cosmos query. We want to turn it into, App Insights query. How are we going to do that? So we want to allow our customers to map that to whatever the heck they want. But it needs to be simple. There's no smart stuff in there. We don't want smart stuff in there. We want really dumb, simple, specific, basic things, primitive things that allows people to kind of go and say, "Oh my God, I can use OData for whatever, literally whatever I want." There's this kid that reached out to me and he said to me, "I'm trying to write a translator from OData queries to GraphQL queries. Is your OData Neo can support me in that?" I said, absolutely. If you want to put in a chicken from one side and get a cow from the other side, that's exactly what OData Neo is about agnostic structure that will take a protocol in and process and turn it into whatever you want from the other side. You're going to have to determine your own mapping. What's beautiful about this is that people will be responsible for their own mapping. So Sam, how you get 50,000 issues on your OData repository, you won't need that. You won't need that anymore. We're detaching and modularizing so people can own their own components. I want at some point in time people go on NuGet.org and publish odata.neo or odataneo.sql mapping or odataneo.cosmos mapping. Marketplace. Go ahead and download the extensions and hook up to this service and start running with it. And then once we're done with all of this, we can start talking about the lake house. What would that going to look like? That's actually the interesting part for me. So far, we're just moving data around. I want to bring in a new pattern, new concept, see how that going to help us with our structure here. I don't know. Maybe call the SAC vertical. I don't know. We'll see.
To be
God damn it with your internet.
What was that, Sam? Well,
What?
anyway,
How was that?
while his stuff's catching up with him,
Mhm.
at some point you could have a low-code designer for anyone that implements OData Neo. So basically, they go into an admin area and say, "I'm gonna hook it up to GraphQL," and then they can put in whatever things they have to do and the config and have it all low code.
Whatever needs to happen, I'm
Yeah.
okay with that. I'm very okay with that, Joe. I don't know if it's do you mean a UI, like an actual designer on a UI?
Sort of. So if you take like let's say WordPress, and you're
Uh-huh.
like, I'm gonna have an OData interface for this, and it's gonna be able to communicate with GraphQL. So they just pick the parts and wire them up, and you could basically do the whole thing. Since both are discoverable services, you just map the attributes and should
I'd
be able to work
love
fine.
I'd love to explore that option. I know there is the Sam, do you remember the previous program manager for OData, Swaroop? Do you remember Swaroop? Swaroop, the guy that was a program manager for us at OData? No?
Slope, TM.
Yeah. Yeah, Swaroop. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So he had a nice visualization for OData. I wish I had the URL. So Joe, if you send an OData query, it will roll up into graph with extensions, all these trees, all these branches. It's freaking amazing. It was sitting on some weird website that, I can't even, it was like a Azure websites.net/OData/ some other craziness. It's something that he was playing around. I'll try to reach out to him and see, is he still with us, Sam? Is he still at Microsoft? Do you know? Saurabh?
Yes.
Okay, I'll reach out to him and get these links and show it to you guys next time.
That would be fun to see.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, that's a wrap. I gotta run, but thank you all for hopping in today. For people watching us, questions, comments, concerns, compliments. Feel free to drop comment in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys later. Take care. Bye.